Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we're now going to be diving into the news that broke just this morning that the Miami Dolphins are signing cornerback Jalen Ramsey to a record-breaking contract extension. Just earlier this week, we saw the Broncos and cornerback Pat Surtain agree to what was the highest paid defensive back contract in NFL history in terms of average annual value. And in comes the Dolphins to swoop in and just barely up that. It is a 3-year, $72.3 million extension for Jalen Ramsey, who has been an All-Pro for years now, and even last year dealt with injuries through the first 7 games, but when he came back, definitely made his impact felt for Miami as they went on to make the playoffs. And when I mentioned that Surtain contract, he got 4 years, $96 million, which was $24 million per year in terms of average annual value, and in comes the Dolphins to give Ramsey $24.1 million per year. So a little bit petty almost, but honestly, this is a well-deserved contract when you're talking about the legacy of Jalen Ramsey, where he definitely deserves to be one of the highest paid cornerbacks and defensive backs in NFL history. That being said, it does feel like this could be a little bit of an overpay for Ramsey. Now, he's still just 29 years old, and just 29 years old, obviously about to turn 30, so it's not like he's young by any means, but it's not like he's old yet either. That I still think he has a few good seasons ahead of him as well. That it's not like this is going to be a contract that I feel awful about, but that being said, I think it's maybe a little bit of an overpay in terms of, a couple of years from now, we'll see how it ages. Again, definitely still possible that he is at the top of his game. We've seen some steps back over the past couple seasons. He produced well enough for them last year that I don't think they're crazy for doing this, but that being said, could be something that we look back on and does not age all that well, especially considering the fact that Ramsey may not even start the season for the Dolphins once again this year. Mike McDaniel was speaking to the media earlier today and said that Ramsey's status for Sunday's game against the Jaguars is still a bit of an unknown. He's dealing with a hamstring injury, so it doesn't sound like it's too serious, that he'd be able to return soon enough anyways, but not exactly great news to hear right after you give somebody the most expensive contract in terms of average value per year, and immediately you find out he might not play your next game. But maybe that's just a little bit of an overreaction. It's not like these contracts are about, trying to get great week 1 performances. It's ultimately about postseason success, and that's where the pressure is currently at for the Miami Dolphins. And I do want to talk about what their upcoming season looks like and what challenges they're going to face. But before I do that, I do quickly want to hit on this idea of the fact that I don't want to graze by the fact that Patrick Surtain and Jalen Ramsey both became the highest paid defensive backs in NFL history within the same week. When we talked about this deal for Surtain on Tuesday, or I believe it was Tuesday, when we talked about it, part of the conversation was that in today's NFL, what are the positions, I should say, that get paid the most money? Obviously the quarterback's best friend in a blindside tackle. Wide receivers obviously have seen a huge boom in contracts this offseason. On the other side of the ball, it's defensive ends, the players that are supposed to get to the opposing team's quarterback, and now corners as well are sort of seeing their value take some ticks up. And that's something that we were talking about earlier in the week, is the fact that I don't know if the cornerback market has exactly been booming for all of this time, but now as we see wide receivers continue to make more and more money, on the other side, you need players to lock them down. And I think that corners could see a significant increase in money in years to come. Now, part of it, and I don't know if this is a totally fair statement, but cornerbacks, it does feel like, because of how reliant more times than not, especially at that corner position in juxtaposition to the safety position, it's a lot of dependence on your athletic ability because you're trying to mirror an ultra athlete that is lined up against you at receiver, but basically do it again in reverse, backpedaling and such throughout. So I think it's one of the positions, if not the position, that is most dependent on athletic ability. Running back, maybe you can make an argument as well. And typically we see running backs, and I think to some degree, cornerbacks age not as well as some of these other positions. That is where my hesitation would come in general, with, definitively saying the cornerback money is coming fast, that I think that teams are still going to be a little bit hesitant to hand out those contracts unless it's for some players young, such as a Pat Surtain. Maybe this Jalen Ramsey contract can be something that is used as a little bit of a measuring stick of how late can these cornerbacks execute at an extremely high level. But it's not like he's obviously the only one either that's seen it. I mean, you have some other players in their late 20s that are making big bucks as well, like a Marshawn Lattimore or a Marlon Humphrey. But generally speaking, I do think that these are positions where you look at all of the top corners in the NFL and how many of them are past their age 30 season. It's pretty far and few between. I guess you can look at the Eagles with Darius Slay and James Bradbury as those are sort of the veteran corners that are still prominent. But I don't know how many people are still slotting them into top 10 corners in the league and those types of conversations. So ultimately, I think it's a little bit more of a young man's position, but I am pretty fascinated as to what the overall philosophy with paying cornerbacks is going to be for years to come. Obviously, the Dolphins don't care. They feel like Jalen Ramsey has enough in the tank. That so be it. They're going to go pay him. But again, a contract that I think is going to be pretty crucial to the overall market of cornerbacks in years to come based off of how this deal ages for Jalen Ramsey and the Dolphins. But again, just sort of final thoughts here on the Dolphins themselves. They have a good amount of pressure surrounding them in terms of playoff success. Now, it's not make or break season in terms of jobs could be lost, really, if things don't work out for them. Mike McDaniel just signed a contract extension, so he's going to be in Miami for the next handful of years. Same with quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. So it's not like, again, this is if this year goes wrong, blow it up. But there's definitely a little bit of buzz over the course of the offseason as a whole, I think, about this idea that McDaniel needs to win a playoff game. It's getting towards that point. He's also, helped transform this offense significantly in the past 2 years, and I'd argue that, I don't know if I would have picked them in either one of the games, whether it be in 2022 against the Bills or last year against the Chiefs. I probably would not have picked either of them, but injuries were also a pretty significant part of both of those games. Tua wasn't even available down the stretch of the 22 season. It was Skylar Thompson starting for them. And last year, there were a ton of injuries on the defensive side of the ball for the Dolphins that they were sort of having to scrap a little bit to put together even a roster to throw out there on the football field on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that, not that, again, injury excuses can only take you so far and can only sort of hold off the critics for so long. I don't know if people are even really giving McDaniel that benefit of the doubt, which, I personally am, but I'm not sure if that's a common sentiment among, the majority of NFL fans. But I I'm not super optimistic about this upcoming season for the Dolphins. They definitely have a great chance to make the playoffs once again. But, talk about, we went through the numbers yesterday. It's usually around half of the playoff teams don't make it back to the playoffs the next year. And there are maybe some red flags with that Dolphins defense, not super substantial ones, but you talk about sort of the inconsistency with injuries on their defense, and it's that can only go so far. Again, we're talking about injuries here, but Ramsey's missed his handful of games. Bradley Chubb, excellent edge rusher, but injuries have been a part of his story, unfortunately, early on in the NFL. They lose somebody like Andrew Van Ginkel, who gave really good production from an edge rushing perspective last season. So there are a lot of potential concerns. I don't think it's anything too substantial. I think that Mike McDaniel is an excellent head coach, but really the thing that you have to look at is the difference of their record versus good quarterbacks to bad quarterbacks, because they have been able to sort of be merchants of some degree of beating up on bad teams and have really yet to go out and take advantage, or not take advantage, but, be able to fight above their weight class a little bit. And that's what I think that I'm really waiting for the Dolphins. But that being said, trying to lock down a player at a position that can potentially shut down opposing good quarterbacks, that's definitely a part of that conversation. So, sort of coming full circle here, they went out and they paid somebody because they are convinced that he can help shut down these opposing really good quarterbacks that have beat them in the past couple years. But we'll have to see. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back on Monday afternoon to break down all of the weekend action in sports. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Take care. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.